Hello everybody, this is Cranky James and we are back with a Season 19 tier list. I apologize for the lack of content everybody, but I promise stuff is on the way, just gotta be patient here. Anyways, we're on to Season 19, the penultimate season of our Big Thomas rewatch. We've gone through 18 previous seasons in a spin-off, now we have Season 19 and 20 laid before us. So, Season 19... let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. First episode of the season is Who's Jeffrey? And this episode is an interesting one for me. I do like this episode. The big thing about it is I don't really get the inciting incident. So this episode is obviously Thomas lying about a character named Jeffrey who doesn't exist, but pretending he exists. I really like the climax. I really like other parts of the episode. I don't really like the inciting incident. I don't really get it. I'm not sure why Thomas lied about it. Like, Thomas has done far worse things and owned up to it more immediately. So, either the thing that Thomas had to do was worse, like, it should have been something, like, it should have been, like, a pretty serious accident, or it should have been something where, if he was caught, there would be, like, a significant consequence. Like, say Thomas was going to the beach and he was going to take children, and now because he did what he did, he wouldn't be able to take the children to the beach or something, so he lies so he can still do the job. Something like that. But this episode doesn't really give an explanation for it. It's a weird episode nonetheless, but I do enjoy it, so I am going to put it in the B tier. Next we have The Truth About Toby. And this is kind of another weird episode for me. Not the biggest fan of this one. It's not terrible, but it's not great. I just don't love the way the characters all kind of assume Toby's gonna get scrapped, or they think he's being scrapped and don't really do anything about it. It's a very repetitive episode of these consistent gags of the characters misunderstanding the situation and Reg making it worse. So I've ultimately decided to put this episode in the C tier. Some of the things I do like about it, I do think there's some fun character interactions, especially between Henrietta and Toby, but other than that, just not really a lot in this episode to love. And then we move on to the third episode, Lost Property. And I put this one in the A tier. It's a really fun story, kind of funny. Really some nice comedic moments in it. I love the moment with Gordon and Thomas, when Thomas is trying to get the Fat Controller's attention, and for whatever random reason, Gordon assumes Thomas is talking to him, and he just pompously says, "Oh, you don't have to call me sir." I wasn't talking to you, Gordon. Like, I don't know. It was just a really random, like, one-liner for Gordon to have. And I don't know why they did it, but I really enjoy the fact that they did do it, so... With that, I do put this episode in A tier. I do think some of the gags with the Fat Controller, and this is something that happens really starting this point forward, they started really leaning into more physical comedy with the Fat Controller, and this episode has a couple bits of it where he gets 2 black eyes by the end of it. It does feel a little forced in this episode. There are better episodes where it is used, but I kind of like the idea of doing so, because it is trying to make the Fat Controller feel more like a character. And less like this big angry authority figure, so I kind of get it. So for that reason, I will put the episode in A tier. Then we get Henry Spots Trouble, the first D tier episode of the season, and not the biggest fan of this one. You know me, I don't like when Henry is scared of a thing or is being a hypochondriac, and this is basically the worst of two worlds. I don't know why Henry is flipping out so badly. I mean, we know why, but I just never understand why they did this with his character. It's just, it's annoying. I will say the things I do like in this episode, I like how they set up the other engines getting chicken pox. One scene I really enjoyed, and I kind of forgot about it, just because it's such a random thing for Thomas to do. But there's like this brief moment of physical, almost silent movie type comedy in it, where Gordon gets splattered by red paint because the painter knocks it on the tracks and Connor sees it. And that whole sequence there's no dialogue. Everything is just by the characters' facial expressions. So it's like the painter knocks it over and Gordon kind of makes like an annoyed face, just seeing the messy paint not really getting sprayed yet. and then they both see Connor coming, and then they both kind of look at each other in the paint, and there's this like look of horror, and then Connor splashes Gordon, of course, and then he's just annoyed. But again, just a fun moment like that. But really, outside of that, there's really not much else to like in this episode, so kind of had to put it in the D tier. And let's just say there's a few other episodes that'll be joining it, being lower or on the same tier. Then we get a Cranky Christmas, a solid Christmas episode. This season, technically, depending on how you look at it, has 5 Christmas episodes. We'll get to it when we get to it. But we start with the first one here. It's a solid story, a little repetitive, but a solid story. I do like seeing some of Cranky's insecurities. I like the ending where Cranky lets it slip that he did in fact drop the crate with the skates, and then he tried to hide it. I'd like seeing more of Edward in this episode. Edward doesn't really get an episode this season, but he has a few roles where he's a little more prominent, and this is one of them, so that's nice. We move on to Snow Place Like Home, our first S tier episode of the season. I really enjoy this episode. I will admit, looking back on it on rewatch, it is a little weird seeing Kevin bounce so much in this episode. It's something that, like, obviously, you know, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not going to get into it, but it is a little weird that he does it so much in this episode. Like, in other eras of, you know, the show with him in it, he is jittery, but I wouldn't say he's, like, voluntarily moving himself, if that makes sense. This episode he is, and it's whatever. It's a little distracting, but it doesn't hurt the episode, because really the heart and soul of this episode is Victor's relationship with Kevin, and just how far he would go for him. Just a lot of great moments for him and his character, and we get to learn even more about Victor. So, really solid episode as a whole. Felt very critique heavy for an S tier episode. It's just something I really wanted to point out. But again, really fun episode. Love the visuals, love the daunting look of winter, you know, the rough blizzardy weather going on. It's just fun to see. Then we get the Beast of Sodor. And this is one this is an episode I was alluding to earlier with Henry Spot's Trouble, that you look at as an episode where the comedy, or excuse me, not Henry Spot's Trouble, Lost Property, where the physical comedy for the Fat Controller is done a little bit better, because this is a very comedic episode with some horror elements to it. You know, talking about the abominable snowman. I like seeing the wacky adventures the Fat Controller gets up to, trying to get to lunch with his mother. Henry and Spencer's dynamic is fine. Again, I don't like the scared Henry dynamic in this episode, but I do like to see that Henry actually stands up for himself. And a lot of it is more Spencer preying on Henry, so I can kind of forgive it. So the episode, again, is a little more repetitive, but is a really solid Christmas story, and it belongs in the B tier. We move on to Toad and the Whale, yet another B tier episode for this season. Toad and the Whale, really nice story. I like the seriousness and the tone of the story, because, you know, yes, this is a situation where the whale can die. I like Toad in this episode. I don't love Oliver in this episode. He's very judgmental for some reason. Ugh, I cannot talk tonight. I don't know why, but he is, and we're dealing with it, I guess. But other than that, this episode's a fun one to watch. Put it squarely in the B tier. Again, just a solid episode for this season. Then we get Very Important Sheep, and I guess we're just in a slalom of B tier episodes here. This episode kind of felt like ASMR to me a little bit. There's a lot of sequences with not a lot of narration, not a lot of dialogue. You have this beautiful acoustic guitar in the background and these nice calming animal sounds. It's a very serene episode. An episode that just kind of embraces spring, which is perfect timing for this time of year. But yeah, not a ton to the plot. It is a little silly that Thomas decides to pick up all the sheep and take them in Annie and Clarabelle, but again, the comedy is played nicely here, so a nice episode to put in the B tier. We finally get out of the B tier with this next one. where we're going to drop all the way to the F tier for a first F-ranked episode of the Brenner era, and it is Salty All at Sea. And there's really only 2 words to describe this episode. Character assassination. I do not like this episode. I get what they're trying to go for. It's the idea of a character being scared to try something that they've bragged about doing their whole life. It just isn't Salty. I just refuse to believe Salty is legitimately scared of traveling on the ocean. I mean, he is literally saying, "Don't take me away from the sea," in the previous episode. I just refuse to believe that Salty willingly not want to go on a ship. I just can't believe it, and this episode is not great, and it goes in the F tier. We move on, though. We get all the way out of the F tier, bouncing back greatly into the S tier with Den and Dart. A great episode this season. And this is a much more improved episode than Old Wheezy Wobbles all the way back in Season 16, which shows Den and Dart's separation anxiety. Which is a really nice trope to give the two of them. Because we don't really see it among the other twin characters, well, they're not really twins, but brotherly-like characters, or just bros, or close friends, or whatever you want to call them. We don't see that very often. The only other episode that comes to mind is, like, Twin Trouble with Donald and Douglas, but that's also because they were feuding. Here, Den and Dart, they struggle to function without one another, and I like that Toby and Mavis basically swap pairings with Den and Dart to kind of help both of them out and help them, get through the day. And, I love the montage when Den takes on the trucks at the quarry. It was nice to see him nicely featured. It's nice to see the quarry nicely featured. An area that we just don't go to very often. Moving on. Helping Hero belongs in B tier. Just a solid episode. The episode kind of feels like 2 episodes mashed together. It's like the first half of Thomas traveling with Hero, and then the second half of Thomas trying to help Hero. It's a solid episode, not a lot to it though, so that's why it went in B tier. Then we get, in my opinion, my favorite episode of the season, Slow Steven. I love this episode. One of my favorite sequences in the show is the bridge collapse, the suspension bridge collapse in Calling All Engines, but here we get to see it happen almost in slow motion. And we see engines going back and forth across it as we know that this bridge is ready to collapse. It's damaged. I love that. I love the suspense. I love how seriously this episode takes it. And I like that the reason why Steven's even able to warn anyone at all is because he can go slow enough to notice every little sound that the bridge makes. I love pairing him up with Gordon. I love this episode taking place in fall. Not that it has anything really to do with fall, it's just nice that, in this era of the show especially, they were perfectly okay having episodes take place at random times of year. So, my favorite episode, no notes, nothing else to say, best episode. Then we have Two Wheels Good, which is, in my opinion, a C tier episode. Mainly just because it's just kind of a nothing burger plot. It's not very entertaining. It's just the characters complaining or arguing who has the best or who has the most wheels and which is best. Weirdly enough, Spencer says he has 20 wheels when he has, depending on how you count it, 22 or 28. I don't know why he says 20. That was a weird error the show makes. Don't ask me why he does that. Because I don't know. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Yeah, just a solid episode. We get to see Lord Callan for the first time since, the model era, so that's cool. But really not much else to it. Just a very simple, kind of bland episode. Then we get Reds vs. Blues, which I really like this episode. I love Thomas and James stories. They're a great pairing. And I love some of the shots in this episode. There's some really beautiful lighting on Thomas and James. In some of the nighttime, or the dating, the sunset scenes at the beginning. I love those shots. Really, at this point, the animation is really beginning to peak for the show, and I love how this season looks. And this is one of the best looking episodes. I just love the competitive spirit. I love Percy, coming in towards the end. And then there was trouble, that little one-liner. That's something they started doing this season, where they started giving characters these one-liners in episodes for comedy. They definitely are starting to put more of an emphasis on making the episodes funny this season. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes not as much, but this episode was pretty fun. Then we get the best engine ever. I love this episode. It belongs in the S tier. I'm not the biggest fan of Emily is insecure plot lines, but if you were to do an episode like that, I think this is the best example. I love pairing her up with Caitlin and showing someone who seems as confident as Caitlin can still have her own insecurities because she can't push things because she'll get damaged. I love that this episode is a majority female cast. We get a bunch of female characters interacting off of each other. That's fun. Not something that I don't know if the episode was made fully with that intention, but it was nice to see that happen, because it's very rare that Thomas episodes revolve around two female characters, but it's cool to see them do that. But yeah, it's just a great story. I love the climax. Not much else to say. Then we have the little engine who raced ahead, which is the beginning of Philip's storyline. I put it in the B tier. In its own, it's a very solid story. I do like the whole mix-up with him and Gordon. I like the pairing of him and Gordon, because, and we'll talk about it more in the next episode, but Philip is supposed to be very reminiscent of a character, of a particular character, and we can kind of see that teased throughout this episode. Philip is essentially a kind of a new child, or almost the baby now, on Sodor. This young kid-like character interacting off of everyone, and he's kind of fun to see play. It's kind of fun to see his dynamic with each of the characters. Starting off with Gordon, this episode is very much a launching off point for his character, so for that, I put it in the B tier. Solid episode. Then we get Philip to the rescue. And this episode finally kind of reveals who Philip is supposed to be reminiscent of, and he's reminiscent of a very young Thomas. Obviously, earlier this year, we got The Adventure Begins, which we got to see what Thomas was like in his early days again, and you get this great moment between Thomas and Edward, where Edward reminds Thomas, like, you were just like him. He doesn't say it like that, but he says it in a much, more casual way. And the fun thing about it is we immediately get the really useful engine music in the background. But enough about that one scene. The rest of this episode is great. I love James and Philip's dynamic. I love how James is just immediately jealous of Philip because he gets attention, and he's, quote, a show-off. I love the crash sequence. I love the train that James... I don't know, I'm just a sucker for consist sometimes, and I just love James's consist in this training. In this episode, it's a really fun one. I like the way Philip rescues James. I like the scene at the end where Edward even himself kind of reminds Philip, well, actually, now you're kind of being a show-off. Kind of checks Philip there. Yeah, but really good episode. And we move back into the S tier one more time with Diesel's Ghostly Christmas. Now, technically speaking, this is 2 episodes, but I'm counting it as one because, let's be honest, it's just one big story. I really like this episode. Obviously, if you guys have been in the fandom for a while, you've seen a lot of people do parodies of A Christmas Carol. I've done my own years ago, and mine starred Diesel, and quite a few other people have done ones that star Diesel. The thing about this episode, though, that I like so much is it doesn't just retell A Christmas Carol. Right? Like, if you're familiar with A Christmas Carol, you'll follow the story, you'll get all the references. But this episode very much takes that story and makes it its own, because it does a lot of different things. It's not 3 ghosts visiting Diesel. It's not just the same story, but you just insert the characters in existing Thomas characters, right? Like, some characters are very clearly supposed to be characters from the story. Like, Diesel's obviously Scrooge. The Fat Controller's Tiny Tim, because he's got his bad ankle. I think Thomas is supposed to be Bob Cratchit, and then Paxton's supposed to be Scrooge's nephew. But they're not necessarily direct parallels. They're all they kind of have their references here and there, but for the most part, this episode is an elaborate prank by Thomas and the other engines, and I love the creativity of it. I've never really seen that done before, and I love it. I love that this whole thing is to scare Diesel, and it really kind of brings full circle to this point that Diesel's kind of been on this arc where a lot of people have been checking his attitude and trying to get him to be a better person, and this is the first episode that's a step in the right direction to changing Diesel's attitude. There's some great moments throughout the episode. I love the moment before Salty is gonna get hit by the tree. He just kind of accepts his fate, and then we see the crash off screen and Diesel's smirk. I love the moment when Diesel is saved by Thomas and Rocky. He quotes Scrooge, "I'm as light as a feather, I'm as merry as a schoolboy," and it cuts to Rocky, and he just is like, he kind of looks at the camera with the most like, what the heck is Diesel doing face. But anyway, I really like that. Just so many great moments in this episode. It's really heartwarming. One of the best Christmas episodes, if not potentially the best Christmas episode the show has done. Then we move on to Thomas the Babysitter, which I put in A tier. Just a very sweet episode. I really like this one. Really not much else to say. I like that the story is more focused about how hard raising a baby is and not just shaming people for having babies or how annoying babies are. There's some good comedy moments. This feels kind of like, again, that like season 1, season 3, Thomas's branch line type story, but that's fine. I really like the vibe of this episode. I love the musical sequence when Thomas goes up and down his branch line. I love that they named the child after Thomas, and I think we even see the child a few years later in the show. A little more grown up, but it's this very sweet episode, and it belongs in A tier. However, we go to F tier with Wildwater Rescue. This episode's just kind of annoying. The rescue team just kind of acts like children the entire episode, and it's very annoying and very frustrating. It feels very season 15-y. Just the levels of stupidity in this episode. But the one redeeming factor of this episode, which not redeeming enough to get it out of F tier, is I do kind of like what it does with Rocky. It shows that he's the glue of the team, and that he's kind of the mature one, and he's the one that kind of guides everyone through everything. So, yeah, F tier episode. Then we have Other Side of the Mountain. Other Side of the Mountain I put in the D tier. I just don't love this episode. I find that the ending rather unsatisfying. I think the crash in this episode is bad, and I think the plot's kind of maddening. So, not much else to say about it. But then we bounce all the way up to S tier, or the final S tier episode, No Help at All. I love the China Clay episodes. I love this one. So many great moments throughout it. I love the scene when the Fat Controller goes stomping up to Bill and Ben because he's mad because they've been causing trouble. I love that this episode, and frankly many others, are interconnected this season. There's kind of this loose sort of connecting storyline of things happening. So like this episode takes place around the time of Salty All at Sea, and there's a couple other factors. This episode references a few other episodes. It references Best Engine Ever, and another one off the top of my head I don't remember, but it's not important right now. And it kind of very quietly, I think, also sets up Phillips episodes. Again, the airing orders of the seasons can always get weird, but I think there is supposed to be kind of a timeline of events here. But yeah, really good episode. I love getting to hear Down by the Docks again. That's a cool moment. And this episode is an improvement over season 18's No Steam Without Coal. It's kind of the same story, but again, told in a more interesting way. And it does more for Timothy's character. Then we have Goodbye Fat Controller. This is the last S tier episode of the season. I really enjoy this one. I like the episode. I like this episode because it's kind of a nice. I think at one point it was the last episode of the season, but in this playlist that I watched through all the episodes, it was the second to last. I consider it the season finale. I think it's the perfect way to end the season. We see the Fat Controller get put through so much, and I like the other engines wondering if he's leaving because maybe it's because of stuff they did and they all get in trouble, especially Thomas. I like that they band together and go on strike. Like, this is what the truth about Toby should have been. And it's kind of frustrating that both episodes exist in the same season, but nonetheless, this episode is masterfully done. We get to hear the Sir Topham Hatt song again in his old theme. That's fun to get the two of those in this episode. But yeah, just a really fun episode overall. And our final episode, we end in the B tier with Wildwater Rescue. Solid episode to end the season with. I like the Percy and Diesel dynamic, something we don't get too often in the show. I like the scene at Brendam where Percy's making all the funny faces, but not a ton else to this episode. So we're going to end Season 19 here. So Season 19 is very much a mixed bag season. When the season is great, it's amazing. When the season is weak, it's not very good at all. It has the most bad episodes so far of any Brenner era season. And again, it's still a really good season. It's just not the greatest season. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. I promise I have more content coming soon. This is Cranky James signing off.